It's nearly every fighter's ambition to one day compete for the UFC. But more heartbreaking than never making the big show is to sign for the promotion, but never actually compete. Today we look at the notable names to suffer this unwanted stigma, and the bizarre and controversial circumstances that led to their departures. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 UFC fighters released before their debut. Cedric Dumais entered 2022 as one of the most hyped MMA prospects of recent years. Dumais first came to prominence as an acclaimed kickboxer. Between 2013 and 2021, the Frenchman amassed over 70 wins and became a 2-time Glory welterweight champion, and for several years was regarded as the #1 170-pounder in the world. In 2021, Dumais put kickboxing on hold to pursue a career in MMA, winning his first 2 fights with a skill set well above his inexperience. The performances led Dumais to court the interest of the UFC, and with an influx of French talent and plans for a show in Paris, the 30-year-old signing seemed like a foregone conclusion. In July of 2022, the UFC announced they had signed Dumais to a 4-fight contract, where he was set to face Darian Weeks at the historic French card, only for the French MMA Federation to refuse to sanction the fight due to commission rules regarding fighters with less than 10 professional bouts. It was also suggested the UFC terminated the bout after an MRI scan indicated bleeding on Dumais' brain, something the Aquitanian later quashed in an interview with Ariel Helwani.
That was a mistake. A doctor made a mistake in that test, and he figured out that I have like a blood in my brain. I used to do it like so many times when I fought. I have one boxing fight, and I used to do it. So I just sent the paper to the UFC. I didn't even check, and they just respond to us that I can fight because the RMI is bad.
Despite evidence from 3 doctors proving the scan was an anomaly, the UFC weren't willing to take a chance on Dumais, releasing the fighter from his contract just 4 weeks after his signing. After 2 further wins in the regionals, Dumais penned a big money deal with the PFL, reportedly earning 10 times more than his contract with the UFC. The Frenchman made his long-awaited debut against Jordan Zebo at PFL Paris, endearing himself to his new employers in emphatic fashion.
Is that low stance from Cedric? Oh! Are you kidding me? It's over!
Another fighter signed to cash in on an emerging market was Germany's Benjamin Brinza. Brinza made his MMA debut in 2006, amassing a 13-fight winning streak including a win over UFC alum Dan Stichen. It should be noted, however, Brinza's record features a number of discrepancies, including 2 rear naked choke finishers in 0 seconds. Somehow. In 2013, the UFC signed Brinza believing him to be one of European MMA's brightest prospects, but in their haste overlooked a dark side to the fighter. It turned out Brinza was an active member of a far-right neo-Nazi group, regularly engaging in soccer hooliganism and organizing rallies to incite violence against immigrants. With the UFC making inroads for their first ever event in Berlin, Brinza's signing sparked a major backlash in local media, and soon, UFC president Dana White was forced to face the scandal up front.
The guy's undefeated, and we are going to look into it. And if he any way, shape, or form is involved in, racist groups, neo-Nazi groups, or anything negative like that, he'll be cut.
While the UFC had a complex relationship with right-wing politics, Brinza's signing proved too dark a cloud to overlook. Brinza was released from the promotion shortly after, while the UFC applied stronger background checks for incoming fighters. A similar fate befell Timo Foy. The light heavyweight fighter saw his contract rescinded after details of his right-wing background came to light. The scandal led Foy to abandon his ideology and now works as an anti-racism ambassador for the German MMA Federation. Brinza, meanwhile, never recovered from the controversy, losing 3 of his next 4 fights on the regionals before being effectively blacklisted from the sport, and is still regarded as one of the most toxic fighters in European MMA. Bibiano Fernandes is considered one of the greatest bantamweights to never sign for the UFC. Except he did. Kinda. After first making his name as an acclaimed jiu-jitsu artist, Fernandes rose to prominence with the Japanese promotion Dream, winning 8 of his 9 fights and becoming the company's only 2-weight champion, including wins over Antonio Banuelos and Joe Warren. In 2012, it was announced Fernandes had signed with the UFC, with the Brazilian set to make his debut against Roland Delorme at UFC 149, only to withdraw from the bout due to injury. While the setback disappointed fans eager to see the fighter's debut, it turned out Fernandes hadn't signed for the promotion at all. In an interview shortly after the postponement, Fernandes admitted that while negotiations with the UFC had taken place, the fighter never put pen to paper to a contract, and that the UFC had announced the fight with neither man formally accepting the bout. Preemptive fight announcements have long been a criticism leveled at the UFC, with the practice coming under further scrutiny in recent years. Dustin Poirier claimed his match with Benoit Saint-Denis at UFC 299 was announced before a verbal agreement even took place, while Alexander Volkov found out about his match with Sergey Pavlovich through social media, despite being booked for another bout days earlier. After negotiations with the UFC fell through, Fernandes eventually signed with One Championship, where 10 billion viewers would see him become a 2-time bantamweight champion and one of the company's most successful fighters. USADA ended Ivan Sterdikov's career before it could even begin. For 5 years, Sterdikov had been a fixture of the Russian regional scene, building a 16-0 record with all but 3 of his wins coming in the distance, including UFC veterans Jeff Monson, Rico Rodriguez, and Bigfoot Silva. His bulky frame and brute aggression earning him the nickname the Ural Hulk. After staking a claim as Russia's top pound-for-pound fighter, Sterdikov signed for the UFC in 2019, with initial plans to face Devin Clark at the company's St. Petersburg show. Immediately, many fans expressed doubt Sterdikov would pass the company's increasingly stringent drug tests, and those naysayers were proven right when Sterdikov accepted a UFC sanction after testing positive for boldenone. Sterdikov was granted a 2-year suspension, with the UFC choosing to cut their losses and Sterdikov to sign for Rizin, where such bulbous fames are, dare I say, a little more encouraged. USADA also felt Jennifer Gonzalez. The 35-year-old was set to be the first Chilean woman to compete in the UFC, only to have her contract rescinded after USADA accused her of ducking an out-of-competition drug test. The fighter, however, remembered things a little differently.
Ya, lo que pasa es que yo tengo mi casa al lado del gimnasio, pero en la misma entrada, solo que son 2 portones diferentes. Y yo les dije, esperen que guarde la camioneta y a mis perros y lo atiendo, acá en la puerta que está a 1 metro.
Gonzalez had been riding a 7-fight winning streak with all her wins coming by first-round submission, but has only fought once since her aborted UFC bout 2 years ago.
Y que el tipo quiera entrar de una forma un poco agresiva, menos.
The saddest inclusion to this list is Ohio fighter Josiah Harrell. After an unbeaten amateur career, Harrell made his pro debut in 2020, winning his first 7 fights, including a stoppage win for LFA, one of the final stops for fighters before competing in the UFC. Harrell's call to the big show came much earlier than expected, when just 2 weeks after his LFA win, the fighter accepted a short-notice call to face Jack Della Maddalena at UFC 290, replacing an injured Sean Brady in the process. Harrell comfortably made weight for the fight and was keen to test his skills against the highly touted Aussie, only to be withdrawn from the card after recording abnormal readings during a pre-fight brain scan. It turned out Harrell had been living with moyamoya disease, a neurological disorder causing arteries in the brain to become constricted, and can lead to seizures and even strokes if untreated. While Harrell was aware of neurological issues since he was a child, he believed it was due to misdiagnosed dyslexia, and later thanked the UFC's medical team for potentially saving his life.
In my head, like the little kid in me is like, no, you want this now. You spent all this time and cut weight, you want this now. It's like, and then I think about it, I'm going, okay, I just gotta be patient. That's all I have to do. I have to be patient. Doctor's gonna figure this out. We're gonna have this stuff. And I'm like, okay, cool. I'm already a problem. So hopefully it doesn't limit too much stuff and I don't come back a superhero.
Harrell, however, can find refuge in Vince Murdoch. The Californian saw his UFC debut cancelled after a similar scan in 2019, only to return to the sport after 18 months and later appeared in the UFC's reality show, The Ultimate Fighter. And now time for a few honorable mentions. Iranian fighter Amir Aliakbari was released due to issues securing a work visa to the US. If only the UFC showed a similar strictness with the current fighters on their roster. Pietro Menga failed to make weight for a short notice match with Tim Elliott, and was given his walking papers a few days later. Antonio Tricoli was released after failing a post-fight drug test on Dana White's Contender Series, although he did get to date Mackenzie Dern, so I guess he won in the end. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, post your feedback in the comments, and ring the bell so you never miss a video.